After clinching their first AFC West title in a decade and sitting on the doorstep of the number one seed in the American Football Conference, who would we say is most responsible for the turnaround we've witnessed in the last 2 years with the Denver Broncos? And as we look at the AFC as a whole, is another changing of the guard taking place with some new faces presenting themselves as contenders. All things to come on today's rundown. Thank you so much for joining us. While you're here, make sure you like and subscribe to our Denver Sports 1043 The Fan YouTube channel. You can find us at Denver Sports 1043 on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok. If you're watching us on X or on Facebook, we love you. We appreciate you. Like, share, subscribe, drop some comments, and turn on those post notifications so that you never miss a moment with us. Tons to get into today on a Monday afternoon. And like usual on Mondays, we welcome in our friend of the show, NFL insider to the stars, James Palmer. James, how's it going, man?
I missed you last week, Richard.
I know, I missed you too. I thought about it. I was out of state, and like Monday at around 11 a.m. Pacific time rolls around. I'm like, this is normally the James Palmer day.
I know you're feeling uncomfortable. I thought maybe when you were opening presents, you were thinking,
yeah. I was like, there's going to be a StreamYard link in here somewhere that I'm just going to log on real quick. I hope you had a good holiday. I'm excited to be back here with you, and a lot has happened since you and I last talked. And James, as has been the case over the course of the last handful of months or so, the Denver Broncos continue to put themselves in a very advantageous position. So before we get into kind of the AFC West clinching and the nature of things, what, if anything, have you learned or maybe feel differently about the Denver Broncos when you take in their last 2-game sample size that we had? You had the loss to the Jaguars, which was a little bit of a kick in the teeth. And then you had the Christmas Day nightcap with the Chiefs that was ugly but good, maybe a theme, and ugly in a sense of like, I just think that it wasn't aesthetically pleasing to a lot of people, but it was another win in the win column, keeping the Broncos on pace to have everything in front of them.
I think the last 2 weeks with Denver and the rest of the AFC, maybe the rest of the NFL, was proof once again that we have no clue who's going to win the Super Bowl. And I think every single playoff team is vulnerable to some extent. And I think that's what we saw. And I was texting with an executive this morning, just going over, a lot of these playoff teams. And man, we were talking about Brock Purdy and what we've seen from him over the last 3 weeks.
What a night.
Unbelievable game and unbelievable performance by him. And, if they get the number one seed, which they can, and as beat up as they've been and what Kyle Shanahan's done with them, like, could they win it all if they get the bye and the number one and Purdy keeps playing like this? And the conversation went into, Richie, he even said, there's a chance that, I could see the Patriots or the Bears or the Broncos, who could all be 1 and 2 seeds, losing in their first game. I could see it. And he was just, not a knock of the 3 teams that he mentioned, but he was more or less stating, that's the parity and the way we feel about all of these playoff teams this year. It's just a very different year. So what I learned, to answer your question over the last 2 weeks, really is, I think Denver hasn't separated themselves from that group. I think they're right there with everybody else that has a path, has a chance to literally win the Super Bowl. They do. But could you see them losing in the first round? And man, that would be disappointing. You kind of do too. And so I think they're just part of this entire very curious playoff group of teams that we can go through. But, I don't think any fan base feels 100% confident in the way that their team is playing or the way that their team heads into the postseason.
I want to zero in on the offense specifically here for one more question, because there was a comment from Sean Payton after the game against the Chiefs. I mentioned the phrase aesthetically pleasing, right? And Sean Payton, after the game against Kansas City, came out and said, hey, listen, it doesn't have to be aesthetically pleasing, obviously referencing the fact that maybe things on offense looked a little bit clunky, a little bit stalled. It wasn't exactly the laser show that so many teams around the league on any given week can kind of give you, as evidenced by the Sunday Night Football game last night. So I guess because I had a conversation with one of our weekend shows yesterday, and I kind of laid it out this way, and I'm curious to get your thoughts. There's a part of me, James, that thinks the Denver Broncos maybe, at least in our, little bubble here in Denver, but maybe on a larger scale than that, are kind of redefining beauty standards in the National Football League when it comes to offensive football, because the offense has looked a little clunky at times, and they struggled to maintain consistency in the run game. Post J.K. Dobbins, they've kind of reinvented themselves with R.J. Harvey and Bo Nix and that conglomerate in the running back room, taking on a little bit of a different role. And yeah, it hasn't always looked the way that maybe we would hope that it would. But James, they keep winning games. They had an 11-game win streak. They're a team that is sitting at the top of the AFC. They're going to finish as a 13 or 14 win team in the National Football League. And you can't do that, in my opinion, without, one, being a good team, and two, being an offense that can get the job done. So I think if they check both of those boxes, maybe Sean Payton is right, even if we don't like it or don't want to hear it, James, that it doesn't have to be aesthetically pleasing to accomplish what we want the team to accomplish. Where do you come down on the overall evaluation of the Broncos offense and maybe the disparity between what's going on the field and the eye test of how it looks?
Yeah, I think I'm reading into Sean's comments saying we accomplished what we wanted to accomplish to get us closer to the number one seed, period. That's what we need to do. Can we still get better as an offense? Certainly. If we have the added time, does that help us get better as an offense? Certainly. I think that's a great part of what he's saying, is that, we needed to come in and beat a third string quarterback. And let's just remember, still a pretty well-coached team, still a team that went to the Super Bowl a season ago, still has a lot of very good players on it. But I think a lot of people went in going no Patrick Mahomes. Wow, not even Gardner Minshew. We should steamroll. It's not an easy defense. Steve Spagnuolo is still coaching that defense over there. I think that still should, be overlooked. But I think he also is saying, it wasn't aesthetically pleasing. Bo wasn't super sharp. The offense wasn't super sharp. And I think they found ways to win. I think they're part of that group. Last night, and we just talked about it, didn't you think Caleb Williams was going to go down there and win the game?
I did.
You did. You have that feeling about him. I think you have that feeling about Bo Nix late in games. I think they've earned that the way they've played late in games over the course of this season. Of course, you want more consistency. Every team's looking for more consistency. The defending Super Bowl champs, when I talk to people in that building, are looking for more consistency offensively because they just haven't had it. You've seen Bryce Young have these comebacks, last 2 years. He's been great coming back in games, but then he lays these duds like he did this past week. And these up and down performances are happening a lot around the league. I think even when Bo has been a little bit up and down this year, and he hasn't been terrible by any stretch, I think we have been, when I talk to teammates in the locker room, I think overly critical of Bo's performances probably this year because the expectations were so high after his rookie year. But I do think even when he doesn't play his best, that they win is valuable. And I think that's part of what Sean's saying as well, is that even when we're not at our best, it wasn't aesthetically pleasing, we still got the win. We're closer to the one, and we also can win games, maybe without having the greatest of performances. There's some teams that are heading into this postseason, Richie, that I think they almost feel like they have to play perfect football to win a football game. That's wild. Yeah. You know what I mean? If the Bears can't force a couple of turnovers, they're in some trouble, right? That's the way they live right now. If the Eagles defense doesn't play outstanding, they're in some trouble. And so I do think that he was saying a couple of things, in my opinion, with his comments there, but I think those were the two that jumped out at me the most.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair evaluation. And again, the way that I kind of have just rationalized it in my own mind of you can say that the Broncos are paper tigers. People are pointing out the New England Patriots have less wins of against teams over 500 than the Giants, who are going to pick first overall in the draft.
Oh, don't sleep on the Raiders.
That's true. There's still time. But anyways, people are pointing that out as to why they maybe aren't as good as their record says they are, or aren't as formidable as what they've put out there on paper. And I said this about the Chiefs in 2024, who were 11-0 in one-score games and won 15, would have probably been 16 games if they didn't sit their starters against the Broncos in Week 18. Even if they're the worst 15-2 team in the history of the National Football League, They won 15 times out of 17 that they lined up across from another team of highly paid and highly skilled professionals. They came out on top. So even if the Broncos are the worst 13 or 14 win team, they still won 13 or 14 games. They have flaws. They have moments of mortality and certainly weaknesses, as does, as you pointed out, a lot of the field, particularly in the AFC. But I just don't know that I felt the way I feel about the Broncos now 2 months or so ago when I'm watching these things going, you know what, this isn't going to be sustainable. This isn't going to work. And I think I've kind of flipped on that, James. I think the Broncos absolutely can win a Super Bowl playing the style of football and winning games the way that they have. And the only way I think you can convince someone or a group of people of that is to do what they've done and just consistently over the course of 4 months, put it out there on film.
Yeah, I do think they have a path to a Super Bowl. I clearly really do. But I think you're Rich, you're kind of going on to something that I find fascinating, because who in the AFC do we clearly respect right now as fans in the NFL? It's I don't know. Nobody respects what the Jaguars are doing. They have 11 wins. Nobody's even paying attention to the Houston Texans, who have 10 wins. Like, nobody thinks that the Broncos can win a Super Bowl playing the way that they've played, with maybe some up and down offense through 3 quarters a lot of the times, and coming back in fourth quarters. Like, they don't think they can win. And then you look at the, what do they have? 13 wins. And then you look at New England. They have 13 wins. Everybody's like, they haven't played anybody. Like, who is respected in the AFC?
Frankly, the teams that we are so used to respecting in the AFC either aren't in the picture or are kind of as mortal looking or on life support in some respects as they've ever been. The Chiefs eliminated from contention. Yep. The Ravens currently outside the playoff picture, going to have a Week 18 showdown with the Steelers and Lamar Jackson. The Bengals with Joe Burrow's continued injury history, but that respect is mainly predicated on respect for the quarterback to be able to just muscle them into, whatever position it is. And you have the Bills with Josh Allen. Nobody doubts that Josh Allen is Superman. He is unbelievable. He reminds me of like an NFL to NBA parallel of like LeBron James and the Cleveland Cavaliers the first time around, when LeBron was just dragging those teams to the postseason. And then ultimately it just kind of crumbles because you run up against more balanced, more complete, more formidable teams that one man can't alone overcome, even if he plays quarterback. So to your point, with the respect factor, and I want to touch on that a little bit later as well. I think that this has been an interesting evaluation year.
Fascinating year.
That's
the point I'm trying to make.
The AFC. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think if you were to just take it at the AFC West, which I think has a lot of parallels or comparisons to the AFC East when you're looking at it, you've got the Broncos, who are now emerging as contenders once again, clinching their first division title since the year they won the Super Bowl in 2015. You always are going to factor, at least for the time being, that the Chiefs are going to be in that picture when you have Patrick Mahomes at the helm with the success that they've had. And the Chargers, even though it hasn't translated in a postseason setting, the Chargers with Jim Harbaugh and Justin Herbert especially have always presented themselves in the regular season as legitimate wildcard contenders and division contenders year to year to year. And then you have the Raiders as well. And I think that stacks up similarly to what you see in the AFC East, with New England now shooting out of a cannon, the Bills with Josh Allen, and then you have the Dolphins, who can kind of make some noise at any given time, but it feels like it's
a little bit of a rebuild.
It's headed for a different direction there, I think, with Tua Tagovailoa. But when you're looking at the AFC West now, James, the way that it has shaken out, where things have kind of flipped on the head a little bit compared to what we're used to seeing, do you view this as kind of a new standard or a resetting of the terms in the division with the power players that are at play? Or do you expect certain things to maybe regress back toward the mean, meaning Denver comes down off its high a little bit, LA is kind of floating there in that middle ground, and Kansas City rebounds in a significant way from what we've seen there? Or is what we're looking at now like, hey, there's not just one sheriff in town in the AFC West anymore?
Oh, I certainly think Denver is here to stay. And I certainly think The Chargers are here to stay. Now, if the Chargers lose Jesse Minter, who is, as I talk to people around the league, one of the hottest names out there, in what some might be, we'll see how many openings we end up having. He's definitely going to get interviews because of, not because, I don't want to take anything away from what Jesse Minter has done with this defense and with the Chargers, but he's very much in the same vein as Mike McDonald up there in Seattle, and we've seen how well that's gone early on in this process, right, Richie? So I think there's a lot of love for Jesse Minter right now and what he could potentially do for a franchise looking for a new head coach. I think that changes things for the Chargers a little bit if they lose him. But overall, or the same, and you could say the same thing if Vance Joseph ends up departing the Denver Broncos. Right. But which has always been, in my opinion, the Chiefs' cheat code is just Steve Spagnuolo can't get a head coaching job. I don't know why, because he's an outstanding football coach. But it's just like it was the same thing as Belichick had Josh McDaniels forever, and it's just like nobody's poaching. What's happening here? And so I do think that the division though is going to be like this for a long time. Look at what the Chargers are doing right now. We know how big this game is, and we'll break it down a little bit. Like, what if Justin Herbert had Joe Alt and Rashawn Slater right now? If he had them for the course of the season, and they were down to their third and fourth and sometimes fifth options at tackle this year, like that team is really, really good. And I don't see that changing a whole lot. They got a lot of good young players, and Denver is the exact same way. No, I don't think the Chiefs are going to be just reigning supreme over this division like you and I have talked about for that 7 years, essentially, with Patrick Mahomes running the show in the same way that you saw with the Patriots doing it through the AFC East for a number of years with Brady. Like, it's going to be, I think, similar to what you've seen in maybe, I don't know, the AFC South. Like, that division to me is going to be, if you can get a healthy Daniel Jones, I don't think the Texans are going anywhere. I don't think the Jaguars are going anywhere right now. Those teams are going to beat up on each other. Look at the way the NFC East has beat up on itself for the last, forever. They haven't had a repeat division winner since 2004 until this year when the Eagles won it in back-to-back years. And so I do see this being a division where we're going to follow it as the course of the year goes on, because Herbert's just too good, and Harbaugh's just too good, and Sean Payton's just too good, and Bo Nix just keeps ascending, and this is only year 2. And so I really do think, no, we're not going – I don't think we're going to go back to the years where, like, Patrick Mahomes was just – it would be rare if he lost a divisional game.
Right.
I think those days are over.
Yeah, no, it's going to be, I think, really interesting to see, one, how the remainder of this postseason shakes out and what it kind of forces other teams within their own divisions or within, the conference as a whole to do, to recognize how the balance of power is seemingly starting to shift. Before we shift gears, James, I want to ask you, you get the first crack at it, as you do most weeks, at our weekly poll question here around the station, which is, who is most responsible for turning around the Denver Broncos in the way that we've seen over the last handful of seasons, coinciding with all 4 of the players on your screen there finally being under the same roof within an organization? You've got Greg Penner and the Walton Penner ownership group. It can't be understated the impact that they've had on the organization as a whole and the trickle-down effect that it has. George Payton, the elder statesman in the group, kind of manning things in the front office with what he brings as a talent evaluator and a scout. Bo Nix, the budding franchise quarterback, and then Sean Payton, the head coach that drafted him, who left the broadcast booth, was traded from New Orleans to come here, and has kind of reestablished and rebuilt the culture over there at Broncos Park, powered by Common Spirit. So, James Palmer, I ask you, who do you think is most responsible of those 4, factoring in that they all play a significant role in their own various responsibilities? But if you had to pick one, who would you pick?
Okay. When you started this, before your fantastic little graphic popped up there, I was like, this is easy.
Mm-hmm.
But then when I saw the choices that you laid out in front of me, I went, I like these. This is very interesting. Because I will say this, and I'm going to preface this, and I will answer the question. This is not a dodge, but I'm going to go through it a little bit. Covering the entire league for as long as I have, and been in every single practice facility across this league, and every single stadium across this league, and spent countless hours in all of these buildings, more than any human probably should, ownership matters.
Yeah.
Ownership matters a lot. and you can feel it in a building if they have really good ownership. Like, it really does. You use the word trickle down, Richie. That is fact. There is a vibe around certain buildings because of how good the ownership is, about the way the organization is run and the feel within the building. And the amenities might not be the right word, but what they give their players to have them have every opportunity to play at their highest level matters. But with that said, we've seen teams with cheap ownership, bad ownership win Super Bowls.
Yeah.
We have. And so that's going to eliminate Greg Penner, which I think he has already put himself among the elite in NFL ownership already, very, very quickly. They've been outstanding. But just for wins and losses, I would say, okay. I think George has done an unbelievable job. I think he's maybe one of the most underappreciated executives and general managers in this league, because of the bravado that Sean Payton carries himself with, and the weight that he carries with, and where he was, and the say he had in his previous building in terms of roster building and all of these different things. A lot of these great pieces that make this team what it is were in place prior to Sean Payton getting here. And a lot of these contracts, Sean Payton and George Payton, it's very hard sometimes.
Yes,
George
Payton and
are both a part of it, but George has a big say in a lot of these deals that I think, in all honesty, a lot of the contracts that they have signed of late to key positions, and you and I have gone over this, I think the Broncos have signed very favorable contracts in terms of, in the view of the organization and the dollars they've spent. And that's a big part of what George Payton has done. But I also think you don't win Super Bowls without a quarterback and a head coach. And those are the two most important things for success on the field. I think George has done an outstanding job. So if I'm ranking them, I'd put probably Greg Penner here, then George here. And then I'm going with Bo, Sean Payton. Sean Payton is at the top of the list. You can't win these games without a really, really good quarterback. We've seen it. But what we did see when Russell Wilson was absolutely abysmal a few years ago, when he first arrived in Denver, what was he like when Sean Payton started coaching him in the next year? It's a different quarterback.
They were 8 and 9. Yeah.
It's a different quarterback. And it was different success on the field. He found ways to make Russ, even though he had been much limited in what he can do successfully on the football field compared to what he was doing in Seattle, as they were trying to change. He was trying to change what he did and all these different things. That's Sean, right? And that's his offense, and that's his coaching, and that's how he operates. Sean has flipped the culture. Sean has flipped the offense. Sean hired Vance Joseph. Like, I guess George is involved in that as well. But all of this, I think, comes down to Sean Payton. I really do. And so we've talked about the culture on here. We've talked about what he's done with Bo. I think he's done a great job bringing him along. I don't think Bo's perfect. I think anybody would probably, with a straight face, say, yeah, James, you're probably telling the truth here. But I think Sean has made him successful as he's learning to play NFL quarterback. And so, yeah, I think game management has been dramatically changed since the arrival of Sean Payton in terms of miscues that have occurred in this organization during game day with clock management or any aspect of the other intangibles that go along with what happens on game day. So, yeah, I think Sean is the one. All of them play a part, certainly, but I think Sean, to me, is the one that's most responsible.
I couldn't agree with you more, James. And I think the fascinating part about evaluating,
he also drafted Bo Nix. It was his call, essentially.
Correct. That was his guy. So. Yeah, he tricked the Vikings, didn't get in JJ McCarthy. The fascinating part of the evaluation, just if you ask him, that's what happened. Yeah. The fascinating part about evaluating each of their individual contributions and all that is that the juxtaposition between what they've been able to do and where things were when they inherited it, plus who they inherited it from, adds such value to each of their cases. You juxtapose the Walton Penner ownership group with what the Broncos had with the trust situation with Joe Ellis and Rich Slivka and Mary Kelly, etc.
Rough situation. I will say this: I'm not going to knock Joe for the way what he was put in charge of. But
it was an unfortunate series of events that led it to be that way. And then it just became this like Game of Thronesian weird thing. So no, it's not responsible, or held responsible by one particular person, but you had the way that things operated under the trust compared to the Walton Penner ownership group. And man, does that just add an extra like shine onto everything Greg and Kerry Penner and the group as a whole have been able to do. You look at the way that the front office was succeeding and or operating before George Payton came in. And you go back to the latter half of the Elway tenure where he was kind of calling all the shots and the bad contracts that were handed out, the fact that they not only weren't paying well, they weren't drafting well. You had guys not making the team 1 or 2 or 3 years beyond their draft position or their draft date. The Nathaniel Hackett experience being the predecessor to Sean Payton is the most glaring of the two because Bo Nix and Russell Wilson, then you have the carousel of quarterbacks prior to that. But really what hammered it home for me when I was doing this myself was looking at things and the way that it unfolded with Nathaniel Hackett versus Sean Payton. And then you use that lens to roll over everything that he's been able to do to reestablish and rebuild an identity, a winning culture, and bring back and revive so many aspects of this franchise that has known a lot of winning in its time in the NFL, something that so many previous coaches since Gary Kubiak had failed to do in pretty significant fashion. Sean Payton's impact on this team is so rapidly becoming evident, and I think it's putting them ahead of schedule in ways that I didn't expect, frankly. Like, I think that, when the move happens, just like after the Russell Wilson trade, it was, well, the Broncos are Super Bowl contenders. They just got a franchise quarterback, and that's your, like, knee-jerk reaction. And I think there was some of that with the Sean Payton thing, but it was also met with a lot of skepticism, fair or not. And I just, as I was sitting there pondering the question myself this morning, I just thought to myself, is he perfect? Does he have some quirks to his personality and maybe your things that rub people the wrong way or that make you roll your eyes or that are frustrating here and there? Sure. But man, I would take 200% of all the negative aspects that people want to point out about Sean Payton if it delivered the amount of results that we're receiving right now, almost 3 seasons into his tenure here with the Broncos.
I love this question. I'm glad you agree with me because it's the right answer. But I also think when you look at what was displayed to us in the 4 individuals that are there, that's the mark of a good organization,
right,
from top to bottom. And that's what you're always looking for. You're looking for ownership that doesn't meddle, ownership that listens, ownership that empowers those appropriately. Sean asks for certain things, and this ownership group provides them. Our team needs this. They provide it. Okay, what do you like? Sean, let's let you make that decision. There's also a really good collaboration. These are all the words that I think are huge in good organizations when I ask around the league. There's an outstanding collaboration between George Payton and Sean Payton. Like, I think it's one of the reasons why Jacksonville's doing really, really well. There's a great yin and yang that I'm told between Tony Boselli and James Gladstone. There's a very, analytic, driven, smart mind coming from Les Snead and James Gladstone. There's a very, football savvy, done every single job in the Jaguars organization. And, oh, by the way, their greatest player in franchise history is running the other side. The collaboration between the two of them, I think, are a big part of why the Jaguars are working well. Same thing with Sean Payton and George Payton about how they evaluate players and see things the same. And then you can't have a young quarterback come along, in my opinion, in the NFL properly without an experienced play caller and an experienced offensive mind. I think that is why we're seeing this with Drake May. That's why we're seeing this with Caleb Williams in his second year. Look at what these guys have in common. They have really, really good, smart offensive minds that are bringing them along the right way. I'm not taking anything away from the growth that Bo Nix has done, but each one of these individuals are kind of relying on the other ones to make them even better at their job. And that's the cool part about a good organization. But I do think Sean is kind of the linchpin to all of it. because he does have his hand in the evaluation of players. He does have his hand in the quarterback. He does have his hand in how this organization is growing with a young ownership group. Nobody else can say that their hands are in all of those.
No, it's a great point. That's a great point. And honestly, the Broncos are obviously better off for it. And again, I think it just reaffirms the fact that we don't actually, we don't know what the ceiling is for this Broncos team this year or in the next 2, 3, 5, however many years that this particular group of 4 gets to stay together. And I think that's really, really exciting. It is time to hit the turn, presented by The Birdie Bar, Louisville's premier indoor golf bar and entertainment space. With their heated patio and miniature golf setup, they have the perfect way for you to beat your winter blues. James, if we zoom out just a bit on the AFC as a whole, with the playoff picture coming more and more into focus, one more week to decide that final spot there in the AFC North, it kind of feels like some, we touched on it a handful of minutes ago. There's some new kids on the block here a little bit when you're talking about AFC playoff contenders. And some of the familiar faces are either fighting for dear life to hang on or already eliminated from postseason contention. But we also mentioned, and you did, you kind of laid it out there, there's a little bit of a trust factor about whether or not we really believe in the sustainability of what our eyes have seen over the course of this season with some of these new teams. So when you're looking at the AFC playoff picture as a whole, you've got 3 teams with 3 relatively new. I mean, Trevor Lawrence is not, but Drake May and Bo Nix, and then Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars fighting for that number 1 seed. With the other players that are involved and maybe some of the perennial mainstays we've become accustomed to in the AFC further behind than they normally are, where are you at when you're looking at the overall evaluation of the AFC playoff picture and how much you believe in the sustainability as contenders of some of these new teams that have emerged?
I mean, we can go down the list. Should we do it? I mean,
let's do it.
I think Denver, obviously, I think they have everything you need from special teams to defense to a clutch quarterback and obviously a Super Bowl winning head coach to win a Super Bowl. I think they have all of it. I think they have really good protection up front. I think they've still given up the NFL's lowest number of sacks, I believe, still. They have a couple of the highest graded offensive linemen in football. If you love PFF, whether you love it or not, whatever, it's there. By the way, sidebar, love Garrett Bowles getting his due this year. The guy has been one of the best left tackles in football the last couple of seasons, and nobody has paid attention. I'm really stoked that he got a Pro Bowl. I think they have an average group of pass catchers that have a tendency to make big plays in big moments. I think Cortland is maybe one of the more underrated ones out there, but I think as a whole, it's not outstanding, but I think they do make plays. And so I think the only question people have is like some of these games that they've come back from late, Richie, like when will it just be like you ran out of time, you made a mistake, or something happened to where you couldn't pull it off? Right? Like, I think that's one of the questions. And obviously it's a quarterback with not a million starts. And that's always what everybody thinks about. And I think a run game, I think that's always a part that everybody goes, if you can't run the ball in the postseason, it's sometimes difficult. Yeah. I'm not going to go as long on everybody, but I do think we talked about New England, and I looked this up since week 11. I think they're giving up like 146 yards a game on the ground.
Okay.
It's been bad. Now, Milton Williams does come back on their defensive line, which is their big free agent acquisition, if you remember this past offseason, coming over from Philly. And I think Campbell's going to start practicing again at the left tackle spot, which might help them. But they haven't really played anybody, and everybody's kind of curious about how this team would play in a dogfight, I would think, like Denver does have experience in. Jacksonville, nobody seems to know what the hell is happening down there outside of Liam Cohen and his staff are doing an outstanding job. That's what I hear around the league. They're doing a great job. This is the best we've seen Trevor Lawrence. And I think they're doing a very good job with a bunch of players that are just solid NFL players. And it's almost like they know exactly what those guys are going to give them every week, Richie, and they do a good job with it. But there's not like stars galore, right, on that roster. They just
Right.
play good football. That's kind of the way they play. They're just an enigma. I talked to a GM the other day. It was just like, I just can't put my finger on the Jag. But I really respect what Liam Cohen's doing. I'm going to skip over the Steelers because I think they're honestly borderline irrelevant within the landscape of heading to a Super Bowl. I really do.
Yep.
I don't think anybody wants to play the Houston Texans. I really don't think they do. I was saying most of the year that I believe the Broncos and the Texans have the best defenses in football. I hate to say it. I think the Texans have the best defense in football.
There's reasonable things to point to.
There really are. It's really, really incredible. They do one thing very, very well, and I did this on The Athletic the other day that Denver just can't do, and Sean brought it up on Monday. Like, they can't turn the ball over.
Yeah.
They can't force turnovers. It's just an issue. Like, I think last week the Texans could say they gave up as many passing touchdowns this year as they have interceptions. It's pretty good.
Wow.
And they have outstanding, edge rushers. CJ Stroud can get you a lot of chunk plays. I think it's a good group of pass catchers. I think Nico Collins is really good. The youngsters are coming along. Dalton Schultz is good. But the offensive line has been very inconsistent. But I think what makes them so scary, and you saw this in the Chargers game, and all of Denver, was watching it, is you get 2 chunk plays with CJ Stroud in that offense, like, boom, it's over.
Yeah.
Defense is going to, giving up 16 points a game. Like,
right.
You know what I mean? So I don't think anybody wants to play them, but CJ has been inconsistent, and that offensive line has been bad. And he's taken a ton of sacks at times. Like, I think there are definitely concerns, but I don't think anybody wants to play them. The Chargers, I think Justin Herbert's been hit a zillion times, and that's difficult. He can make a lot of plays, and the team can let him down. I think the defense is good, but the offensive line is a really, really, really big concern. Buffalo, we've seen it all. Like, right? They can't stop the run. They don't have an outside threat in the passing game. Some people around the league think Josh doesn't play that great in structure. When he plays outside of it and he's a magician, he's outstanding. But what's the foot like? And can they beat you just playing within the scheme of the game if you can contain them? I don't know if Buffalo's as good as they've been in years past. So that takes us through pretty much everybody. I would say this. I think the AFC is upset, Richie, with the Steelers not beating the Browns this week. I really do. Because I don't think anybody in the AFC wants, even though he's not playing well, Lamar Jackson to be in the postseason.
No.
Like, you just don't want him in the dance, right? Like, you want to close the doors and leave him outside because we know if he comes inside, anything's possible.
Yeah. You got an MVP. Yeah.
Seriously. And so I do think that's a little bit of a strange X factor there with Lamar, even though he hasn't played like Lamar. But we've just ripped flaws straight through everybody within the AFC. And so I'll ask you, who do you trust? Do you trust it because Josh is really the only one with playoff experience? Like, if Lamar doesn't get in, I guess you'd have Lamar or Aaron Rodgers with playoff experience there. But you're looking at a bunch of guys that are going to be going through a playoff run for the first time in their careers, really.
Yeah, the trust thing is tricky for me because trusting within the context of this season and trusting in terms of sustainability are two different things. And if we're just talking about this particular season, which is the most accurate thing we could try to project, or at least talk about, our faith and confidence in it, I think this might be, as a whole, significantly is too strong, but this is a worse Buffalo Bills team to me than the Buffalo Bills teams of the last. If you were to take 3 or 4 years, this one might be the worst.
Yep.
And it makes me feel like, I've kind of felt it as each year has gone by, like, the Bills might have missed a window there with Josh Allen, and they had a tough path to get through in the postseason.
They've whiffed on some picks. I think that's what's hurt them.
Yeah,
like to reload, and you got to hit on picks when you pay the quarterback.
So I don't know that I trust that Josh Allen can win any game, and he might be able to just John Elway strong arm it, LeBron James in Cleveland, whatever, especially in an early round matchup, and maybe it fizzles out in a conference championship and a divisional round, etc., the way it has for his entire career. I don't know that I trust the Ravens all that much with Lamar Jackson, which is crazy because I remember when the trade went down.
They're my Super Bowl pick.
Through a good body of work, I'm thinking to myself, how the hell is a defense supposed to stop maybe the best running quarterback in the NFL in Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry on the same offense? Like, putting one of them on the field is hard enough to stop, as evidenced by their stats. Now you have them both, and it's just not translating the same in this season. He's obviously been hurt and in and out of the lineup, and that's never easy to overcome as a team. So I don't know that I trust the Ravens. And then, the Steelers to me are whatever.
Skip it.
But
they're not very good.
The top portion of the playoff picture there, I think I trust the Broncos as much as I could trust a team that's put what they've put out there and been in the position that they've been in, because it hasn't been aesthetically pleasing. It hasn't been confident at times. It's taken some high wire, tightrope walking, hard to replicate circumstances. But that's also how it was in 2015 for that offense. Now, maybe this is a little bit more, and that defense was better.
Yeah, and it's like, even though Peyton wasn't Peyton,
he's still Peyton.
Peyton.
Yes. Yeah, he was Peyton here and significantly less so from there. And that's something that, again, factors into the evaluation of it. The New England Patriots, again, people say they got one win with teams over 500, less than the New York Giants, who have basically an inverse record at this point in the season. And I get that, but I'm looking at what they've put on paper this year, and it looks pretty good, because unlike the Broncos, they have dominated several teams that are below that category, which the Broncos struggled to do last year when they got upset by the Bills. And it manifested itself in that regard. I don't know that I would look at New England all that differently than I would look at Denver. And then Jacksonville, to your point, they would have been the team I trusted the least in this situation. But whatever
what they do 2 weeks ago. I mean, they beat the Broncos.
Yes.
Like, from every aspect.
It was rough. And it was exactly like the situation that you described when you're talking about the Broncos, like, oh, at some point is the carriage going to turn back into a pumpkin, or your defense doesn't make the big stop, or your offense runs out of time to continue to do these things. Well, that's kind of what happened against the Jags. They punched you in the mouth. You built too big of a deficit, and you just couldn't crawl back. And I don't know that I trust Trevor Lawrence all that much. But whatever Liam Cohen's got going on down there in Florida is working. And Trevor Lawrence looks like, for maybe the first time in his career, truly looks like the quarterback that he was poised to be coming out of Clemson. He was in that Andrew Luck, Peyton Manning type of thing, where we knew the second that he set foot on Clemson's campus, that guy's going to be the number one pick when he declares. And we can just write it in pen right now. And he looks like that for the first time. So I think all these teams that we mentioned, for the most part, especially at the top, are wildly dangerous. But I don't know that I trust any one of them more than the next.
Yeah, I think that's why this postseason is going to be really, really fascinating. And I think that's why the 1 seed is so coveted by these teams.
Yeah.
I think all 3 of those head coaches, now there's 3 teams that have a chance for the 1, right? The Broncos have the greatest chance, followed by the Patriots, then followed by the Jaguars. But I think that's why all 3 of these head coaches are sitting here going, if we just have to play one less game, we can maybe win 2.
Let some carnage happen. You never know.
You know, something might happen. If we can avoid that, I need my quarterback to play two good games, right? So I do think that's why that 1 is so coveted, because there is so much up in the air. And I think everybody believes that they do have the ability to get to the Super Bowl. I do think that. I think there are probably, and I asked this to somebody the other day, I think there's probably 8 teams that think they can win the Super Bowl. And they may not be lying to themselves. Legitimately think they can win the Super Bowl. And I don't think that's the case every year. I really don't. But I would say, now this wasn't part of my conversation, this is now to you. I would say of those 8 teams, probably all of them, if they were being truthful with themselves, going, I can see a legit way we could lose the first game.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they're concerned about something and have to fix that. And so this is a really wide open race. And what better year than to have, a quarterback who's pretty clutch and an experienced head coach and a pretty solid defense. And so I think I said this halfway through the season, and now I'm feeling kind of smart about it. It's like the defensive lines across the NFL are like determining a lot of what goes on in the postseason here. And now it's starting to come to fruition. When you look at a lot of these teams, they play pretty well up front. And I think that plays a part because we have these question marks about inexperienced quarterbacks on big stages.
It is so hard to predict how the game board is going to fall in the NFL in every given year. And I think that for the Broncos in 2025, so many dice have fallen the right way, and they have continued to build on the momentum that they built on the back half, especially of last year, and put themselves in a position that many didn't think that they would be in. And I agree with you, James. I've said it to you. I've said it to plenty of people. When I look at the number one seed, to me, if the ultimate goal for the Broncos is to win a Super Bowl, I think the number one seed is a need. I don't think it's a want, or it would be nice, or it's a luxury, because I think all the teams, especially the two that are bunched up right there with the Broncos at the top, are thinking and fighting the exact same way. And so to put themselves in a position the way that they have, to have that luxury where you have the odds-on favor to win that seeding and put yourself 2 home playoff games away from a 10-year reunion in Santa Clara, I think is unbelievable. I am so excited and thrilled that the Broncos have found a way out of the dungeon that they put themselves in, frankly, for the better part of the last decade. And there's just, to me, this state and this town is electric when the Broncos are putting out the product that they've put out in 2025. And I cannot wait to see how the remainder of the final piece in Week 18 from an AFC playoff perspective comes into view, and then what shakes out in this postseason. Because I really do think that how this postseason plays out will have a lingering effect on the conference as a whole. If all these new kids on the block flame out in their first opportunity, and we're still looking at, some of the older guard, or, the Josh Allens, or maybe it's the Texans who came like the Undertaker from the start of the season they had to now.
3. Yeah. I think you could look at it from the adverse side very quickly. If somebody goes on a run and wins it, say it's Trevor Lawrence, say it's Justin Herbert, say it's CJ Stroud. There is oftentimes a chance where, okay, now the perception in that building, the way that team feels about themselves, the way the rest of the league views them has now changed. And you have a new added individual and organization into this group of real players that you do trust. Right. So if one of those guys goes on that run,
something that Lamar Jackson and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow do not,
Jags will look differently if a string of games is put together and the Jags win the Super Bowl. They're going to be thought about completely differently. Same thing with Justin Herbert. Same thing with CJ Stroud. Same thing with all of these. Same thing with Bo Nix. Like, I think you could look at all of these guys going, yeah, somebody's going to flame out and you go, oh, we're back to the same guys. Or somebody goes on a run and we get a new team that's essentially added into this group that we always say is going to be there every year.
Love it. Can't wait to find out. James, thank you so much for joining us. We appreciate your time each and every Monday here on the show. We'll keep an eye out for everything that you and Steve Smith have going on at the 89. You got Scoop City.
Did you see we did a big Riley? We did a big Riley Moss episode.
I did. Yeah. He's such a fascinating, if you're just talking about a player case study over a single season, he's fascinating. So shout out to Steve, shout out to the 89. Love what you got going on with Diana and Chase. And we will catch up with you here a week from today. Thanks again.
Oh boy. We'll know a lot, won't we?
We will. Okay. It's going to be great. James, have a great rest of your day. To the rest of you out there, have a wonderful rest of your Monday afternoon. We will catch you tomorrow at noon for the next rundown. I do what I love what I do. Second nature to put in the